Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming full moon in the sign of Virgo taking place on the 24th of February 2024. Now, the numerological synchronicity 2424 is so very Virgo like, but let's get to the serious business. It takes place at 5 degrees and 23 minutes of the sign of Virgo, which means that the sun illuminates this from the same degree from the sign of Pisces, where a full moon is always an opposition of the sun and the moon. Now, the main aspect that this full moon is going to hold is not a very precise one at the moment of the full moon, but this might not really be a problem because just a few hours later, the moon is going to progress further into the sign of Virgo, perfecting a trine, a beautiful energy of blessing, basically, with Jupiter, the planet responsible for blessings, good fortune, wisdom, deep faith, and overall expansion. So, on one hand, this energy is going to be a little bit more intense because of this expansive nature of Jupiter, but this is also a good sign, but it comes with a few inconveniences because Virgo is hyper analytical. And the ruling planet of the sign of Virgo is Mercury. Mercury at this moment is conjunct the sun. So it is very, very important for Mercury in the sign of Virgo, Pisces, is not able to bring out its very best qualities because it is rational, it is analytical, and the energy of Pisces is not very permissive of this. And also, since Mercury is the nighttime, exp- sorry, since the planet Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, where it takes on its nighttime expression, it is as further away from home as possible in the sign of Pisces. So this is why it's a little bit debilitated, let's say. But this is not necessarily a big problem for exactly it is combusted, it is conjunct the sun, so that always illuminates something. And when Mercury is conjunct the sun, a cazimi, at this moment, the conjunction is not precise, yet still, it is still operational. So I would really like to take it into consideration. You can see it on the screen here. Mercury at 2 degrees of Pisces, the sun at 5 degrees of Pisces. And actually, if we want to include Saturn, it is at 9 degrees of Pisces. So it is like a triple conjunction. Mercury does need a lot of emotional intelligence here because it is not its typical rational expression in the sign of Pisces. However, it can be extremely useful, especially at the full moon, because it reveals something. It sheds a light on something. And this energy expanded by Jupiter, this is such a wonderful problem solving energy. Why do I say that? Well, because on one hand, both Jupiter and the moon are an earth sign. So whatever is being revealed, it can be very, very practical. And since Mercury is conjunct the sun, and this actually, let me say that the sun is sandwiched between Saturn and Mercury. So this has a powerful reality check to it. And usually this is where it's the gentle kind because it wants to solve a problem. And many times a problem has psychological, spiritual, or let's say a Piscean type of underlining, which is very, very not obvious usually most of the time, because Pisces is the unconscious. Even if we want to look at this energy collectively, Pisces is the collective unconscious, where secrets, etc., etc. are. You know what I mean? You might say, well, isn't secret Scorpio? Absolutely. But Pisces is the kind of secret which is not necessarily kept hidden, with intent. That would be Scorpio. It is simply not obvious, not revealed. For example, the divine mystery. It is a secret, but it is not the scorpionic expression of this. So anyway, this full moon, because of this triple conjunction that the sun holds, has a very powerful revelatory quality to it. And the trine with Jupiter, as I said, the moon will perfect this trine a few hours after the full moon. That can really be useful in so very many ways. And Jupiter is the planet of wisdom. When we add wisdom to intelligence, Virgo, when we add wisdom to sacrifice, service, mastery, efforts, all of this, Virgo, or when we add wisdom to purity, Virgo, or we add wisdom to, now understand this in the correct way, discrimination, because Virgo rules discrimination. Now, the reason why it does so is in ancient astrology, Virgo ruled slaves. That is in a way discriminatory in nature. But in modern times, it is not that type of discrimination. The discrimination to be understood as the analytical quality of the mind, which puts labels onto certain things. You know, let me give you a concrete example. Species. Octopus is octopus in the sign of Pisces. It is an aquatic creature. However, if you look at it from the perspective of Virgo, there is 10 trillion species of octopus, the camouflage octopus, the great kraken, for example, the mimic octopus, the baby octopus. There are many, many species and they are distinct from one another. Virgo looks at the distinction. Or when I order a food, I would like, I don't know, a pizza. But in the sign of Virgo, I'm going to be asked, okay, but what kind of pizza? Pepperoni or vegetarian, cheese, etc., etc. That is how Virgo discriminates. So very many times this discrimination is actually useful and positive because it acts as a factor of precision. If you want to get what you want, well, chances are you have to discriminate everything that doesn't match. It might be similar, it might belong to the same category, but actually, if we look at it from the analytical perspective of Virgo, a lot has to be discarded because it's not perfectly what we want. But if we ignore what we want, if there is a problem, then the solution has to be as close to perfect as possible. But of course, Virgo has a shadow side as well. This is where the hair splitting and the perfectionism, etc., is counterproductive, let's say. And this is so beautifully highlighted by the Pisces Virgo axis. This is where balance needs to be created in order for whatever this axis is about, its myriad of expressions, the balance provides the functionality and the harmony of it. But why am I emphasizing all of this? Because Saturn is in the picture. When the moon is going to perfect the trine with Jupiter, it is also going to perfect its opposition with Saturn. So reality check. Saturn in the sign of Pisces, what kind of reality check? Well, on one hand, what happened in the past? Many times, Saturn, the structure of the past cannot be erased with, it cannot be reset just like that. Many times, the past, what happened in the past, well, Saturn informationally, well, it matters. You cannot bypass it. But on the other hand, that Saturn can also represent morality, that Saturn can also represent certain type of standards, especially in the sign of Pisces, the sign of finalities and terminations, where something needs to last, I wanted to say a very long time, but with Pisces, sometimes even forever. And termination, and termination and problem solving. There is a problem, a long-standing problem, Saturn in the sign of Pisces. If you terminate it by a solution, you have to make sure, or ideally Jupiter, idealism, that the solution lasts for maximally possible to the end of time, if that is even possible. So this aspect is like bittersweet. It is a blessing, but it's not easy, because usually Virgo requires either big brainstorming, hard work, Saturn sacrifice, but this is where Saturn opposing the moon. We must make sure that the sacrifice is not just bitter, not just sour, not just like, I know that this word is gonna spark rage because of what's happening in the world right now, but don't understand it in that context. Pisces many times is martyrdom. So if there is a solution to a problem, we must make sure that it's not demanding the ultimate price. Symbolically to be understood, of course, because if the solution deletes everything, well, let me give you an example. I want to fix my computer. I can fix it by throwing it out the window and buying a new one, but that's not, you know what I mean? That's not ideal. That's imbalanced. So basically, the solution, the effort of it, the sacrifice of it must not be overwhelming. So Pisces comes with the compassion. Mercury conjunct the sun, it comes with the lucidity. The sun in Pisces shines a light on the unconscious, even collectively speaking. Mercury in the presence of Mercury in the zone, in the neighborhood, let's say, make sure that we understand it or understand it, or somehow we embrace it, even if that understanding is not linear. Not linear, even if that understanding is more like emotional intelligence and empathy. Very many times empathy is counter mercurial. Why? Like we are feeling, let's say, the pain of another person, or the problem or the inconvenience that another person is struggling with in their lives. It's almost like we make it our own. That's illogical in a strictly mercurial sense. Like, why bring this pain or whatever to yourself when you don't have to? Well, Mercury in the sign of Pisces, you have to, because it is compassion, and compassion won't make sense in any other way. But I think you already understand where I'm going with this. So, again, this full moon comes with, a duality to it. But it is not the typical duality where it's either black or white, or good or bad, doom and gloom or happiness. It is where both of it mix together. And the best way to explain is to speak about a little bit about the Sabian symbol of this 5 degrees, 5 to 6 degrees of Virgo, which is a merry-go-round. How absolutely beautiful. And I love this so much. It is so very typical of the Pisces Virgo axis. Why? Because that is life. That is any problem. And that is basically the Virgo path, because the Virgo path is associated, for example, with the path of the monk. Monk, to be understood in basically any religious path, any religion, Buddhist monk, Christian monk, whatever, you know what I mean? Because usually the monks, before they're admitted to the proper spirituality of their journeys, they have to go through a very rigorous, meticulous, and infinitely hard, painful, full of sacrifice, training, if training, or like I'm not even sure the best word to it, like a trial basically, but a trial which I do believe that in Christian paths, in the Middle Ages, of course, it lasted around 4 years, but It may be the same in anyway, I'm not an expert in this. It lasted a number of years. And at those years, the monks didn't do anything spiritual. They did hard labor and certain daily routines, Virgo, which were almost ridiculous to them. Like, how does this even make, you're just making me suffer? This is immediately reflective of the uh, Pisces Virgo axis. The suffering is the Pisces. However, this was also a selection process. Very, very Virgo, the discrimination of the Virgo. Those people, those souls, those youngsters who just could not bear this, of course, had to be discriminated in a positive way because that was useful to them as well. As much as you aspire to this, this is not your path. So it was ultimately positive. But those who did manage to live up to the expectations and all of that, by the end of this training, they didn't really need all that much philosophy because by the end, they figured it out themselves that life is about hardships, life is about sacrifice, life is about finding joy, serenity, and embracing the highest expression of the divine love through this pain. But their pain was sanctified. Let me give you an example. Some of them, these trainee monks, didn't exactly work at the temple. Some did, but that sanctifies itself because if you clean, if you cook, if you do whatever, you serve the whole temple basically. Others might were sent to help the disadvantaged. When they did that service, you can imagine that the gratitude and the deep appreciation of the disadvantaged was like celestial honey. That made them learn the lesson of humbleness. That and this humbleness is so very much like the Virgo Pisces axis, because that humbleness is the key, the gateway. And from Pisces Virgo axis perspective, the only gateway to the heart of the divine. Because if you need to conjure up a miracle, this is where Mercury needs to be in Pisces in that sense. Because you can't do it with the mind. Neither can you do it solely with the passion of the heart. You can only do it by that deep humbleness where you melt into the soul of the divine. So, but of course, in this day and age, why am I even speaking about this? So, but this is where it's so important to understand the merry-go-round, because that is life. Up and down, the cycles succeeding each other. And very many times these cycles, I'm not speaking about the 4 seasons and stuff like that. Many times the cycle is in every day. Maybe you have a very rigorous and tough morning routine. Maybe you have a very tough and rigorous service, job, or whatever. That is pain. But the rest of the day will 1,000,000% have the honey. So the merry-go-round up and down. And as soon as we embrace this, as soon as we embrace the ups and downs and they become part of our natural rhythm, a mutable energy, Pisces and Virgo, mutable axis, you can imagine that our being will resonate. Our being will no longer see hardship, sacrifice, pain, uh, the service that we have to offer either to ourselves or in any other context as something to be afraid of, as something to be shy of. This is where that pain will be embraced in a most beautiful way. And what does that mean? An opposition to an axis is the opposition of the two sides. That means that when life gives us the honey, when life gives us the joy, the fun, the detachment, the lightheartedness, on one hand, it will feel all that much more magical, more sacred, and at the same time, it cannot spoil us. Because would it become too much, we don't even need to think about it. Our beings will just have the limit. Saturn, where is the limit? Where does something spoil you? And the same is with sacrifice. Because, for example, Saturn shows its most cruel sides, not just to people who are deeply hedonistic, also people who are obsessively self sacrificial, the need to be needed. So, Saturn always works well with balance. And Saturn doesn't like useless sacrifice. Saturn wants that sacrifice in any way, shape, and form to mean something. So, all of these lessons are definitely going to be highlighted in our lives, at least one area of our lives, or more generally speaking, uh, but also collectively. But I'll speak about this just in a little bit. And Jupiter, now going back to Jupiter, on one hand, Jupiter trines, so it expands. It expands the merry-go-round as well. So at a a day before and a day, maybe a few days after this full moon, we are definitely going to be feeling the merry-go-round. This can drive us insane on one hand, of course, but it can also, how should I explain this? It can also make the lesson sink in very, very deeply and last all of our, this wisdom may last all of our lifetime because of Saturn's presence. Now, another element which I really, really like, which I really find very interesting, is that okay, after a few hours after the full moon, trine Jupiter opposing Saturn, but Saturn and Jupiter are in sextile. So that is much more useful, much bigger of a blessing than the actual trine as well. Because what we do with the wisdom, what we do with the justice, what we do with the blessing of being able to solve a problem of ours, that is truly gonna evoke deep gratitude. And I also have to say that a Virgo and Pisces is a medical axis as well. Pisces usually rules everything that is liquid within our body. And you might say that, well, isn't our body 80% more water? Yes, but not necessarily in that sense, although that is also relevant. This is where it's like the endocrine system, hormones, blood, minerals in the blood, the levels, etc., etc. While of course Virgo is the gut, Virgo is the biome, the micro. I'm not sure if I'm using this term correctly. Microorganisms and stuff like that. Virgo is also many times our pets, our beloved animals. So this is where many times a full moon doesn't even affect us in a close personal way. It affects our pet, but our pet is part of our everyday life. So it's almost like affecting a part of our own projection. Because, you know, many times pets are the projection of our inner child or inner parent, inner something, you know. So this is where this full moon is going to shed light on something. Maybe a vulnerability, a weakness that you have, and this will inspire you to go to medical analysis. Saturn, Sun, Mercury, and Pisces. Pisces rules hospitals and laboratories. But laboratories are basically co-ruled, both Pisces, Virgo, and Scorpio. So, you know, put it into context. And this may cause a medical visit, but it reveals something. And not just the problem, also the solution, the full moon. While for other people who are very aware of their weakness, vulnerability, this may bring them, trine Jupiter, a surprising solution, maybe alternative, maybe something that they did not expect. Because Pisces can also be alternative medicine. Virgo, more classical medicine. But Virgo at the same time rules nature. So it can be plant medicine or traditional medicine. And in the other hand, these are mutable energies. So many times what they rule is a little bit contradictory. But in that sense, Pisces rules substances like the pills, and but pills are of course co-ruled by Scorpio too. So it can be really good news in the medical, from a medical perspective, including on the world stage. Why? Because Pluto is in Aquarius. I know that this has nothing to do with the full moon. However, a tiny bit it has to do, because it's the new, the revolutionary. At the time of this full moon, Mars is tightly conjunct Venus. So that means new partnerships. And partnerships don't need to be romantic. They can be you finding the right medic, the right healer, the right group, anything that you have a problem with. You find the person, you find the specialist, you find the group, you find the information, you find something that is ultimately useful. However, of course, that the moon converses in a quincunx with Mars and Venus, even at the time of this full moon, just that when there is going to be the full moon, the quincunx is not precise yet. But the same goes when the moon perfects its trine with Jupiter, it's going to perfect the quincunx with Mars. Now, on one hand, Venus, Mars conjunction, it might be expensive, it might be inaccessible momentarily, or it might require further study, understanding, communication. So this quincunx can come with an element of unexpected, not so favorable surprise, as in Jupiter gives the hope. Jupiter reveals that look at this solution, but then the Venus and Mars quincunx says, okay, but there are, it's not as easy as that. You know what I mean? Or it can cause a bit of confusion, because if Virgo loves something, it's hit to hair split. Uh, Especially if there's like a new alternative treatment or specialist or whatever, you want to look at the reviews, Virgo. If it's so new, there are no reviews. You have to make your own decision. Mercury conjunct Sun, your user intuition, and that might be very hard for some people. So this is also part of the deal. Now, this full moon does hold much more precise aspects with certain asteroids, planetoids even. So on one hand, um, just let me find it on the screen. So Ceres, first of all, let me highlight it for you. So Ceres conjunct dwarf planet Orcus in the sign of Capricorn does hold a trine with the moon. And I find this really beautiful, because Ceres rules Dimitra, grain, foods, etc., nourishment. And if we put it into collective context, that may give a solution to where there is strong famine. And Ixion is usually the planet of lawlessness, breaking rules. It's a trine. Some rules which are ridiculous must be broken in a way. You know what I mean? So this trine really delights me, and this is where it's definitely good news in that sense. However, it also holds a square with asteroid Pallas Athena in the sign of Sagittarius. This can represent logistic problems. This can represent that maybe something is very difficult to be understood rationally, you know? And that means that Pallas Athena holds the same square with Mercury. So this is the Mercury as the ruler of the full moon. That's a T square. So something is not, how should I explain this? How should I word this to be that much more clearly understood? Something does not follow common logic. Something needs to be soul searched or brainstormed, or we must use our own natural instinctual logic, the gut, Virgo, the gut feeling, in order to understand the problem or a solution or the situation, what it means to us. But anyway, ignoring Pallas Athena, because ultimately this square is positive. Why? Because it makes us think that much stronger. And Pallas Athena square is much tighter with the sun. So something is being revealed, but we need to process it, but in our own ways. You know what I mean? So anyway, this is ultimately positive, especially Ceres conjunct or Ixion trining the moon, which means sextiling the sun. And both Ceres and Ixion are at 5 degrees. So this is perfect to the degree. It's really, really good. I really like this. And, sextile, Ixion conjunct Ceres sextiling the sun in the sign of Saturn. Sun in the sign of Pisces. I'm so sorry. This is where, for compassion, for humanitarianism, for the sake of love, for the sake of humanity, any rule is going to be broken to feed Ceres, provide nourishment, provide something decent for those who are most vulnerable. And Saturn in Pisces, the big karmic judge, demands this. You know what I mean? It is almost like demanded by the heavens itself. So this is really, really positive in that sense. Now, I would just like to speak a few words about the Venus and Mars conjunction. Venus and Mars conjunction is gonna be with us most of February, because the moment I am recording this on the 14th is when it's already starting. In a way, it's already, the energy is already going there. Now, on one hand, the problem is that this conjunction squares Jupiter. Now, Venus and Mars conjunction, and I'm going to be speaking about this in more detail in a horoscope, or maybe if anyone wants it, I'm going to make a separate recording. Now, when Venus Mars meet in the sky, they usually represent partnerships, partnership cycle. This usually happens every 2 years. So depending on which sign they conjunct, that will set the karmic theme or the nuance of partnerships. Aquarius, of course, is the new, the revolutionary, and revolution from a collective perspective is definitely the keyword here. But this can bring way too new energies in our lives. Jupiter in Taurus, a traditional sign, where we do need time to process it. It might come as a shock. It might come as something that we don't even know immediately what to make of it. And Jupiter likes to expand, and Jupiter's expansion in not a good way is when, we have a meeting, Again, Mars, Venus, it can be any kind of partnership, not just romantic. Professional, finding new groups, soul tribe, whatever. And Jupiter expanding this brings on the good side, the promise, the allure, the overly optimism. And that will, of course, disappoint us. So let us not hype all that much. let's take everything with a pinch of salt. Or Jupiter and Venus conjunction, just that. Let's say that Mars just combusts Venus. Both of these planets, Jupiter the great benefic, Venus the lower blessings. Okay, blessings, but it's not gonna, every blessing has a, every high has a low. You know what, Aquarius, the dichotomy. So let's take it with a pinch of salt, especially with the rule with Jupiter when it holds an aspect with Venus, even a good aspect, even a trine. It's not yours until you have it. Because Jupiter is just promise. Let's make sure it's not empty promise. Because help or any kind of partnership may promise you something and they might not be able to keep that promise, or that promise might not go the way we expected, and not because of malevolence or anything, simply because we live in so unstable times. We don't know how things are going to play out. So take the positivity with a pinch of salt. But this also in a different, from a different polarity, you need to form a partnership. In the context of this full moon, go to a medical specialist. Jupiter expands your fear, especially if you're a person who doesn't necessarily trust something that is way too revolutionary, way too new, way too technological. However, if you have to go, you have to go. You might have to fight your fears. So put this into context for yourself. And on the world stage, money, Venus. What happens with collective finances? This may spark up the imminence of a economic crisis or economic instability. However, expanded by Jupiter, it may not be as bad, as doom and gloomy, as whatever as they make it out to be. Especially that, you know, the conjunction of these planets aggressed by Jupiter and Mercury in the sign of Pisces, illusion. We cannot trust, you know, we cannot trust the information, the communication, the internet, whatever is the collective hype. We cannot trust it. So, yeah. And another thing I want to say is that in the sign of Virgo, at the time of this full moon, even though it doesn't converse with the full moon, we have a Orcus and Juno conjunction. Orcus is a similar planetoid to Pluto, not just in physical reality, but also astrologically, because it is the guardian of the abyss. Pluto, of course, is the guardian of hell. Understand the abyss, that which goes beyond hell. That is where the divine wants to forget something, but the divine cannot obliterate. So it just pushes it into the deepest shadow where light will never ever shine. And that doesn't mean that something cannot emerge from the abyss, because when something is emerging from the abyss, it is humbled, it is purified, distilled to its very, very core essence. That is exactly Orcus, the planet of re-education, in a Plutonian way, if I can. But the biggest difference, Pluto highlights the corruption, Pluto highlights the bad, and we have to put a stop to it by transforming it. Orcus, on the other hand, highlights that, but it wants to fix it. It wants to keep its original form, not necessarily transform it. Let me give you an example. Pluto's way, when your computer is broken, well, either throw it out and buy a new one, or go to the service and not just fix it, but massively upgrade it. Orcus, on the other hand, might say, don't upgrade it, just fix it and keep it, because in 10 years, it's going to be a retro piece and it's going to cost more than the best computer out there. You know what? You see the similarity and but anyway, conjunct Juno, asteroid of partnerships. this to me says certain partnerships can be fixed. Certain partnerships can be worked on. Certain partnerships don't necessarily need to end. And this is where it's also conjunct Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo. So something that we once criticized heavily, maybe now we might see it with very different eyes, especially after this Venus and Mars conjunction will hold the quincunx with this triple conjunction. Orcus, Juno, Black Moon, Lilith. The quincunx will shatter our label, shatter our previous understanding of it. So this can be a really, really good energy. And a final thing that I would like to mention is that the sun illuminates this full moon conjunct a fixed star. Now I'm gonna spell this out because I cannot pronounce it. Deneb, that's easy. Adyge, and this is a very positive and benevolent and fortunate fixed star because it gives intelligence. It gives besides other things, knowledge of astrology. It also gives a very powerful creative impulse and an overall benevolence. So this to me says the problem solving. Conjunct Saturn and Mercury, not the fixed star, but the sun. The sun has an operational conjunction, sandwiched between these two planets, but tightly conjunct this Deneb. This to me says that there's going to be a massive effort to heal or fix or do something really, really positive with the power of intelligence. And very soon, Mercury is going to conjunct this fixed star following the sun. So it will activate Mercury's emotional intelligence. So this is really, really good news to me. And even on the world stage, something is going to be revealed. Not necessarily in a secretive way, although Pisces, that is very much possible, but something that we did not observe, we did not take into consideration, we did not look at, that can be such a good solution, is gonna be revealed. And the world is facing so many problems right now, collective problems. Virgo, discrimination. I'm not gonna name it, just put it into discrimination. But then Pisces, what is moral and what is not? But also Saturn in Pisces, the past. You know, what happened in the past? Well, sometimes it doesn't matter what happened in the past because the past needs to be forgiven. The negative expression of Saturn in the sign of Pisces is vengeance. Not the Martian type of vengeance, but Saturn is the great malefic as well. Vengeance where I'm not gonna forgive this ever. I'm gonna take the grudge to the end of time, Pisces. That's the negative expression. So put this into context. I really hope that forgiveness of any kind and from any direction mutually is going to take place, and that the past can be closed by this, Saturn. That's the positive expression. Finally, the big issues, the hurts, the Pisces, also the religious wars, the spiritual wars. Because don't get me wrong, as above, so below. What does this mean? What's happening in our earthly plane, that is going on up in the astral. So, and this is where Pisces, many times there is no good and evil. We must understand the universe as something complex which has many sides. Those sides have to find their balance, which means just like in an alchemy chemical reaction, when many, not just two, many substances go together and they have to form something new, well, one has to diminish, other has to be amplified, which means that it cannot be 1,000,000% balanced in a 50-50% way. Imbalances or South Node in Libra, exactly. Many times imbalances are the key forward. Like, let me just give you a very easy to understand example. Now, if darkness and light, I know that this is such a cliche, would be 50-50, there wouldn't be any progress forward. If darkness would be, how should I say, leading the bell, would be overpowered, well, then we would be returning to the primordial state. Because what is the primary goal of darkness? To stop heaven and earth from being split. It just wants everything to return to the original. You know, the expression of Tiamat. Swallow everything, and then there is no pain, there is no injustice, because we're truly, in the truest literal sense, all one. Not, we won't be separate from the divine. We will not be created as such. We will just be the divine undivided. But if light would actually, light needs to be, overly, how should I say, it needs to lead the balance. It needs to have more than, you understand what I'm saying. But let's say if that balance would be way over the top, that's like a permanent growth. That is what a forest, if there is like a wild growth, can be swallowed, and the plants will be killed by the parasitic plants, and you know what I mean. So even light has to be uh, balanced out. And what is the purpose of evil, let's say? Well, justice and fairness. And you might say, how so? Well, without that darkness, without that evil, we would never ever know the difference, between our own judgments. As in, we need to be able to judge good from bad. Now, again, let me give you an example. The example of how you call that biblical figure, Job. Job was innocent and very, very faithful to the divine. Darkness came along and said to God that if you would stop your support, if you would send him pain and misery, he would immediately stop his devotion. And God said, well, there's only one way to find out. You know what I mean? That is the role of evil and darkness and whatever, to highlight the truth. Would one fail evil's test? Well, then, they need to be re-educated. Exactly the role of Orcus or the role of Pluto. You know what I mean? So this is where we cannot, the pendulum has to swing in a very balanced way, but that balance is not symmetrical. This is why certain forces need to play themselves out. This is why certain wars, certain conflicts have to play out. Because that is the way nature, but also the astral world itself, rebalances, recalibrates itself. Everything is under evolution. Nothing is static. So as above, so below. maybe the light of this Virgo full moon will highlight exactly that. So thank you everyone for listening. Again, I'm so sorry for making this too long and too philosophical, but for those who truly want to tap into the true essence of astrology, all of these are so very relevant because astrology is not just about the ego. My business, my partnership, my marriage, how to heal my body. No, no, no. Astrology is to understand the psychology of the divine. You know what I mean? So thank you everyone, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, bye for now, and wishing everyone a blessed and truly magical full moon.